Krishna. Hare Krishna, welcome to today's reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are starting a new chapter today, chapter 6 from the 3rd canto. And let's praise the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ki Jai. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhantna Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada, Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalidvanto Dita Aditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita, Paramananda Patnaya, Prema Vakshaksharayate, Savyaya, Shri Krishna Namosame, Madhika Bandha Matsangin, Madguru Matmandana, Manishta Pagya, Madananda Nostate, Asadu Sadutadai, Natini Chataraka, Hanamunja Kadachinmam, Premna Hritos Pura. Of Mahima Stotra. All nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, single of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all of the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Krishna. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Pours down a flood of prema. You can always be by everyone. My constant companion, my spiritual fortune, my source of you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalted of the most fallen, always appear with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we are chapter 6, entitled Creation of the Universal Form of the Canto 3. Text number 1. The Rishi Maitreya said, the Lord thus heard from the suspension of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as the Mahatattva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is nothing wanting in the creation of the Lord. All the potencies are there in a dormant state. But unless they are combined by the will of the Lord, nothing can progress. The suspended progressive work of creation can only be revived by the direction of the Lord. Text 2. The Supreme Powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. Purport. The ingredients of matter are counted as 23. The total material energy, false ego, sound, touch, forms, taste, smell, earth, water, fire, air, sky, eye, ear, nose, tongue, skin, hand organ, speech, and mind. All are combined together by the essence of time and are again dissolved in a course. I am therefore the energy of the Lord and the direction of the Lord, called Kali, and is represented by the dark goddess, generally worshipped by persons influenced by the mode of darkness or ignorance in material existence. Him, this process is described as Mula Prakritir, Avikritir Mahadatyaya, Prakriti Vikritaya Shoda Shakastu Vikaro Na Vikriti Purusha. The energy as material in a combination of three ingredients, is the final source of creation. The Lord enters into the element as his energy, called Kali. The Vedic is the same accepted in Brahma Samhita. It is stated, Eko Pyasau Racha Andakotim Yat Chaktir Asti Jak Andachaya Yat Aha Andantara Staparama Nu Chayantara Stadam Atpurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the Lord Govinda, who is the personality of Godhead. By his partial plenary expansion, Mahavishnu, he enters into real nature and then into each and every universe as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and then Kshirodakashaya Vishnu into all elements, including every atom of cosmic creation both in the universe. And similarly, this is confirmed in Bhagavad 10:42. Atava bahunaitenam kim hena tavarjunam vishtabhyaham idam kritsnam ekam shanagat. Arjuna, there is no necessity of knowing about my innumerable energies, which act in various ways. I enter into the material creation by my planetary expansion, or the super. In all the universe, all the elements there, and thus the work of creation, and thus final cause of all causes. Thus, when the personality of Godhead entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one is engaged in his work after awakening from sleep. Purport: every individual soul remains unconscious after the dissolution of the creation and thus enters into the Lord with his material energy. These individual living entities are conditioned souls everlastingly, but in each and every material creation they are given a chance to liberate themselves and become free souls. They are all given a chance to take advantage of the Vedic wisdom and find out what is their relationship with the Supreme Lord, how they can be liberated, and what the ultimate profit is in such liberation. Haribol, you're looking for the text?
Which canto?
No, it's here. This one. I have my phone.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We have a few small ones, but try to remember for the next time. I have a few small Bhagavatams. Okay, so where we are left? Yeah, this I know, but in which sentence? Such liberation. Yeah, somewhere in the middle of the purport. Not in the middle. First paragraph. In the middle of first paragraph. By properly studying the Vedas, one becomes conscious of his position and thus takes to the transcendental devotional service of the Lord and is gradually promoted to the spiritual sky. The individual souls in the material world engage in different activities according to their past unfinished desires. After the dissolution of a particular body, the individual soul forgets everything, but the all-merciful Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart as the witness, the supersoul, awakens him and reminds him of his past desires, and thus he begins to act accordingly in his next life. This unseen guidance is described as fate, and a sensible man can understand that this continues his material bondage in the three modes of nature. The unconscious sleeping stage of the living entity just after the partial or total dissolution of the creation is wrongly accepted as the final stage of life by some less intelligent philosophers. After the dissolution of the partial material body, a living entity remains unconscious for only a few months, and after the total dissolution of the material creation, he remains unconscious for many millions of years. But when the creation is again he is awakened to his work by the Lord. The living entity is eternal, and the wakeful state of his consciousness manifested by activities is his natural condition of life. He cannot stop acting while awake, and thus he acts according to his diverse desires. When his desires are trained in the transcendental service of the Lord, his life becomes perfect, and he is promoted to the spiritual sky to enjoy eternal awakened life. J. Text 4. When the 23 principal acts were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form, or the Vishvarupa body of the Lord, came into existence. Purport. The Viratrupa or Vishvarupa, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, which is very much appreciated by the impersonalist, is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is manifested by the supreme will of the Lord after the ingredients of material creation. Lord Krishna exhibited this Virat or Vishvarupa to Arjuna just to convince the impersonalist that he is the original personality. It is not that Krishna was Viratrupa is not a sky. It is a manifestation of the Lord. The Archa Vigraha or deity in the temple, similar manifestation of the Lord, but in spite of their material touch, Virat and Archa are all non-different from his form as Lord. Text 5. As the Lord in his plenary power entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into the gigantic form in which all the planetary systems and all movable creations rest. The elements of cosmic creation are all matter and have no potency, unless entered by the Lord in his plenary portion. This means that matter does not increase spiritually touched. Matter is spirit and exists only by the touch of spirit, has not as wrongly calculated by spirit is within matter as long as there is spiritual content within the material body the required size, but at that material body which has no spiritual consciousness stops increasing. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, importance is given to the spiritual consciousness, not the body. The entire cosmic body increased by the same process that we experience in our small bodies. One should not, however, foolishly think that the individual, because the Supreme Hiranyamaya lived for one universe, and all the living. Purport. The Lord entered each and every shy outer space, etc., which are visible to us, is only one half of the complete universe. Before the manifestation and after the entrance of 1 years, all the living entities within the womb of the Mahatattva are divided in all universes with the incarnation of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and all of them lie down with the Lord until Brahma is born. Brahma is the first living being within the universe, and from him all other demigods and living creatures are born. Manu is the original father of mankind, and therefore in Sanskrit mankind is called Manushya. Humanity in different bodily qualities is distributed throughout the various planetary systems. Text 7. The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. Purport. Consciousness is the sign of the living entity, or the soul. The existence of the soul is manifest in the form of consciousness, Shakti. The total consciousness is that of the gigantic Virat Rupa, and the same consciousness is exhibited in individual persons. The activity of consciousness is performed through the air of life, which is of 10 divisions. The airs of life are called Prana, Apana, Udana, Vyana, and Samana, and are also differently qualified as Naga, Kurma, Krikara, Devadatta, and Dhananjaya. The consciousness of the soul becomes polluted by the material atmosphere, and thus various activities are exhibited in the false ego of bodily identification. These various activities are described in Bhagavad Gita 2.41 as Bahu Shakha, Hyanantascha Buddhayo Vyavasayinam. The conditioned soul is bewildered into various activities for want of pure consciousness. In pure consciousness, the activity is one. The consciousness of the individual soul becomes one with the Supreme Consciousness when there is complete synthesis between the two. The monists believe that there is only one consciousness, whereas the sattvatas, or the devotees, believe that although there is undoubtedly one consciousness, they are one because there is agreement. The individual consciousness is advised to dovetail with the Supreme Consciousness as instructed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarva Dharmam Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. The individual consciousness, Arjuna, is advised to dovetail with the Supreme Consciousness and thus maintain his conscious purity. It is foolish to try to stop the activities of consciousness, but they can be purified when they are dovetailed with the Supreme. This consciousness is divided into 3 modes of self-identification according to the proportion of purity. Adhyatmika, or self-identification with the body and mind, Adibhautika, or self-identification with the material products, or Adidaivika, or self-identification as a servant of the Lord. Of the three, Adidaivika, self-identification, is the beginning of purity of consciousness in pursuance of the desire of the Lord. Text 8. The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation and plenary portion of the Supersoul. He is the self of an unlimited number of living entities, and in him rests the aggregate creation, which thus flourishes. Purport. The Supreme Lord expands himself in two ways: by personal plenary expansions and separated minute expansions. The personal plenary expansions are Vishnu Tattvas, and the separated expansions are living entities. Since the living entities are very small, they are sometimes described as the marginal energy of the Lord. But the mystic yogis consider living entities and the Supersoul Paramatma to be one and the same. It is, however, a minor point of controversy. After all, everything created rests on the gigantic Virat, or universal form, of the Lord. Text 9. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1, in the sense that he is the body and the mind and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 7:4-5, it is stated that the 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego, are all products of the Lord's inferior energy, whereas the living entities who are seen to utilize the inferior energy originally belong to the superior energy, the internal potency of the Lord. The 8 inferior energies work grossly and subtly, whereas the superior energy works as the central generating force. This is experienced in the human body. The gross elements, namely earth, etc., form the external gross body and are like a coat, whereas the subtle mind and false ego act like the inner clothing of the body. The movements of the body are first generated from the heart, and all the activities of the body are made possible by the senses, powered by the 10 kinds of air within the body. The 10 kinds of air are described as follows. The main air passing through the nose in breathing is called prana. The air which passes through the rectum as evacuated bodily air is called apana. The air which adjusts the foodstuff within the stomach and which sometimes sounds as belching is called samana. The air which passes through the throat and the stoppage of which constitutes suffocating is called the udana air. 8. The total air which circulates throughout the entire body is called the vyana air. Subtler than these 5 airs, there are others also. That which facilitates the opening of the eyes, mouth, etc. is called naga air. The air which increases appetite is called krikara air. The air which helps contraction is called kurma air. The air which helps relaxation by opening the mouth wide in yawning is called devadatta air. And the air which helps sustenance is called dhananjaya air. All these airs are generated from the center of the heart, which is one only. This central energy is superior energy of the Lord, who is seated within the heart with the soul of the body, who acts under the guidance of the Lord. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:15 as follows. Sarvasya chaham hridisani vishto matta smritim jnanam apohanam cham vedascha sarvar aham veda vedyom vedanta krit veda vit eva chaham. The complete central force is generated from the heart by the Lord, who is seated there, and who helps the conditioned soul in remembering and forgetting. The conditioned state is due to the soul's forgetfulness of his relationship of subordination to the Lord. One who wants to continue to forget the Lord is helped by the Lord to forget him birth after birth. But one who remembers him by dint of association with a devotee of the Lord is helped to remember him more and more. Thus the conditioned soul can ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. This process of transcendental help by the Lord is described in Bhagavad Gita 10:10 as follows. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti tem. In the Buddhi Yoga process of self-realization with intelligence, transcendental to the mind, devotional service, parenthesis, can alone elevate one from the conditioned state of material entanglement in the cosmic construction. The conditioned state of the living entity is like that of a person who is within the depths of a huge mechanical arrangement. The mental speculators can reach the point of Buddhi Yoga after many, many lifetimes of speculation, but the intelligent person who begins from the platform of intelligence above the mind makes rapid progress in self-realization. Because the Buddhi Yoga process entails no fear of deterioration or retrogression at any time, it is the guaranteed path to self-realization as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.40. The mental speculators cannot understand that the two birds from Shvetashvatara Upanishad sitting in one tree are the soul and the supersoul. The individual soul eats the fruit of the tree, while the other bird does not eat the fruit but only observes the activities of the eating bird. Without attachment, the witnessing bird helps the fruit-eating bird perform fruitful activities. One who cannot understand this difference between the soul and the supersoul or God entities is certainly still in the entanglement of the cosmic machinery, and thus must still await the time when he will be free from bondage. Text 10. The Supreme Lord is the supersoul of all the demigods, entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. Purport. The impersonalists are captivated by the gigantic universal form of the Supreme. They think that the control behind this gigantic manifestation is imagination. Intelligent persons, however, can estimate the value of the cause by observing the wonders of the effects. For example, the individual human body does not develop from the womb of the mother independently, but because the living entity, the soul, is within the body. Without the living entity, a material body cannot automatically take shape or develop. When any material object displays development, it must be understood that there is a spiritual soul within the manifestation. The gigantic universe has developed gradually, just as the body of a child develops. The conception that the transcendence enters within the universe is therefore logical. As the materialist cannot find the soul and the supersoul within the heart, similarly, for want of sufficient knowledge, they cannot see that the Supreme Soul is the cause of the universe. The Lord is therefore described in the Vedic language as Avan Manasa Gocharaha, beyond the conception of words and minds. Avan Manasa Gocharaha. Due to poor fund of knowledge, the mental speculators try to bring the Supreme within the purview of words and minds. But the Lord refuses to be so intelligible. The speculator has no adequate words or mind to gauge the infinity of the Lord. The Lord is called Adokshaja, or the person who is beyond perception by the blunt, limited potency of our senses. One cannot perceive the transcendental name or form of the Lord by mental speculation. The mundane PhDs are completely unable to speculate on the Supreme with their limited senses. Such attempts by the puffed-up PhDs are compared to the philosophy of the frog in the well. A frog in a well was informed of the gigantic Pacific Ocean, and he began to puff himself up in order to understand or measure the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean. Ultimately, the frog burst and died. The title PhD can also be interpreted as plough department, a title meant for the tillers in the paddy field. The attempt of the tillers in the paddy field to understand the cosmic manifestation and the cause behind such wonderful work can be compared to the endeavor of the frog in the well to calculate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean. The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods is it open downstairs? Was it? You came the last. Someone. You need to push. So if you're watching, you push. The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods, controlling the elements and ingredients of universal affairs, prayed to the Lord for guidance, and thus he manifested his gigantic form as he did at the request of Arjuna. 11. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." Purport: the demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the post of demigods, who are entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs. 12. Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport: the mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is the controlling deity, or the Adidaiva. The speeches delivered are Adhyatma, or bodily functions, and the subject matter of the speeches is material productions, or the Adibhuta principle. 13. When the palate of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of air in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. 14. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. 15. Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. 16. When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge. 17. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. Purport: the ear is the most important instrument in the body of the living entity. It's ear, not the eye. Sound is the most important medium for carrying the message of distant and unknown things. The perfection of all sound or knowledge enters through the ear and makes one's life perfect. The entire Vedic system of knowledge is received by oral reception only, and the sound is the most important source of knowledge. 18. When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of cessation and their different parts enter into it, and thus living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch. Purport: for sense perception, there are two principal items, touch and itching, and both of them are controlled by the skin and hairs on the body. According to Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti, the controlling deity of touch is the air passing within the body, and the controlling deity of the hairs on the body is Oshadya. For the skin, the object of perception is touch, and for the hairs on the body, the object of perception is itching. 19. When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entities can enjoy sex pleasure. 20. The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus living entities are able to pass stool and urine. 21. Thereafter, when the hands of the gigantic form separately became manifested, Indra, the ruler of the heavenly planets, entered into them, and as living entity is able to transact business for his livelihood. 22. Thereafter, the legs of the gigantic form separately became manifest, and the demigod named Vishnu, not the personality of Godhead in brackets, entered with partial movement. This helps the living entity move to his destination. 23. When the intelligence of the gigantic form separately became manifest, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with the partial power of understanding, and thus an object of understanding is experienced by the living entities. 24. After that, the heart of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered the moon demigod with partial mental activity. Thus the living entity can conduct his mental speculations. 25. Thereafter, the materialistic ego of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered Rudra, the controller of false ego, with his own partial activities, by which the living entity transacts his objective actions. Purport. The false ego of materialistic identity is controlled by the demigod Rudra, an incarnation of Lord Shiva. Rudra is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, who controls the mode of ignorance within material nature. The activities of the false ego are based on the objective of the body and mind. Most persons conducted by the false ego are controlled by Lord Shiva. When one reaches a finer version of ignorance, he falsely thinks of himself as the Supreme Lord. That egoistic conviction of the conditioned soul is the last snare of the illusory energy which controls the entire material world. 26. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahatattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. 27. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the sky separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others were also manifested in terms of the modes of material nature. 28. The demigods, qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 14:14-15, it is said that those who are highly developed in the mode of goodness are promoted to the higher heavenly planetary system, and those who are overpowered by the mode of passion are situated in the middle planetary systems, the earth and similar planets. But those who are surcharged with the mode of ignorance are degraded to the lower planetary systems or to the animal kingdom. The demigods are highly developed in the mode of goodness, and thus they are situated in the heavenly planets. Below human beings are the animals, although some of them mingle with human society. Cows, horses, dogs, etc., are habituated to living under the protection of human beings. The word Atyantikena is very significant in this verse. By development of the mode of goodness of material nature, one can become situated in the heavenly planets. But by excessive development of the modes of passion and ignorance, the human being indulges in killing the animals who are meant to be protected by mankind. Persons who indulge in unnecessary animal killing have excessively developed in the modes of passion and ignorance, and have no hope of advancing to the mode of goodness. They are destined to be degraded to lower statuses of life. The planetary systems are calculated as upper and lower in terms of the classes of living entities who live there. 29. Living entities who are associates of Rudra develop in the third mode of material nature, or ignorance. They are situated in the sky between the earthly planets and the heavenly planets. Purport. This middle portion of the sky is called Bhuvarloka, as confirmed by both Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti and Srila Jiva Goswami. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that those who develop in the mode of passion are situated in the middle region. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness are promoted to the regions of the demigods. Those who are situated in the mode of passion are placed in human society, and those who are situated in the mode of ignorance are placed in the society of animals or ghosts. There are no contradictions in this conclusion. Numerous living entities are distributed all over the universe in different planets and are so situated in terms of their own qualities in the modes of material nature. 30. O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the Virat, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are the natural teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society. Purport. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, the four orders of human society developed with the order of the body of the gigantic form. The bodily divisions are the mouth, arms, waist, and legs. Those who are situated on the mouth are called Brahmanas. Those who are situated on the arms are called Kshatriyas. Those who are situated on the waist are called Vaishyas. And those who are situated on the legs are called Shudras. Everyone is situated in the body of the Supreme in his gigantic Vishvarupa form. In terms of the four orders, therefore no caste is to be considered degraded because of being situated on a particular part of the body. In our own bodies, we do not show any actual difference in our treatment towards the hands or legs. Each and every part of the body is important, although the mouth is the most important of the bodily parts. If other parts are cut off from the body, a man can continue his life, but if the mouth is cut off, one cannot live. Therefore, this most important part of the body of the Lord is called the sitting place of the Brahmanas, who are inclined to the Vedic wisdom. One who is not inclined to the Vedic wisdom, but to mundane affairs, cannot be called a Brahmana, even if he is born of a Brahmana family or father. To have a Brahmana father does not qualify one as a Brahmana. The main qualification of a Brahmana is to be inclined to the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas are situated on the mouth of the Lord, and therefore anyone who is inclined to the Vedic wisdom is certainly situated on the mouth of the Lord, and he is a Brahmana. This inclination towards Vedic wisdom is also not restricted to any particular caste or community. Anyone from any family and from any part of the world may become inclined to the Vedic wisdom, and that will qualify him as a real Brahmana. A real Brahmana is the natural teacher or spiritual master. Unless one has Vedic knowledge, one cannot become a spiritual master. The perfect knowledge of the Vedas is to know the Lord, the personality of Godhead, and that is the end of Vedic knowledge, or Vedanta. One who is situated in the impersonal Brahman and has no information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may become a Brahmana, but he cannot become a spiritual master. It is said in the Padma Purana, Shatkarma Nipuno Vipro Mantra Tantra Visharadaham Avaishnavo Guru Nasyat Vaishnava Svapacho Guruhu. An impersonalist can become a qualified Brahmana, but he cannot become a spiritual master unless and until he is promoted to the stage of a Vaishnava, or a devotee of the personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya, the great authority of Vedic wisdom in the modern age, stated, Kiba Vibra Kiba Nyashi Shudra Kene Noya Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hoya. A person may be a Brahmana or a Shudra or a sannyasi, but if he happens to be well versed in the science of Krishna, then he is fit to become a spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 8.128. The qualification then of a spiritual master is not to be a qualified Brahmana, but to be well versed in the science of Krishna. One who is conversant with Vedic wisdom is a Brahmana, and only a Brahmana who is a pure Vaishnava and knows all the intricacies of the science of Krishna can become a spiritual master. 31. Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form, and in relation to such power the Kshatriyas also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants. Purport. As the Brahmanas are recognized by their particular qualification of inclination towards the transcendental knowledge of Vedic wisdom, so also the Kshatriyas are recognized by the power to protect society from the disturbing elements of thieves and miscreants. The word anuvrataha is significant. A person who follows the Kshatriya principles by protecting society from thieves and miscreants is called a Kshatriya, not the one who is simply born a Kshatriya. The conception of the caste system is always based on quality and not on the qualification of birth. Birth is an extraneous consideration. It is not the main feature of the orders and divisions. In Bhagavad Gita 18:41-44, the qualifications of the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras are specifically mentioned, and it is understood that all such qualifications are needed before one can be designated as belonging to a particular group. Lord Vishnu is always mentioned as the Purusha in all Vedic scriptures. Sometimes the living entities are also mentioned as Purushas, although they are essentially Purusha Shakti, Parashakti or Para Prakriti, in parentheses, the superior energy of the Purusha. Illusioned by the external potency of the Purusha, the Lord, the living entities falsely think of themselves as the Purusha, although they actually have no qualifications. The Lord has the power to protect. Of the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara, the first has the power to create, the second has the power to protect, and the third has the power to destroy. The word Purusha is significant in this verse because the Kshatriyas are expected to represent the Purusha Lord in giving protections to the Prajas, or also who are born in the land and water. Protection is therefore meant for both men and the animals. In modern society, the Prajas are not protected from the hands of thieves and miscreants. The modern democratic state, which has no Kshatriyas, is a government of the Vaishyas and Shudras, and not the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas as formerly. Maharaja Yudhishthira and his grandson Parikshit were typical Kshatriya kings, for they gave protection to all men and animals. When the personification of Kali attempted to kill a cow, Maharaj Parikshit at once prepared a miscreant, and the personification of Kali was banished from his kingdom. This is Purusha, or the representative of Lord Vishnu. According to Vedic civilization, a qualified Kshatriya monarch is given the respect of the Lord because he represents the Lord by giving protection to the Prajas. Modern elected presidents cannot even give protection from cases, and therefore one has to take protection from an insurance. The problems of modern human society are due to the lack of qualified Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, and the over-influence of the Vaishyas and Shudras by so-called general franchise. 32. Means of livelihood of all persons, the production of grains and their distribution to the Prajas, was generated from the ties of the Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called Vaishyas. Purport. Society's means of living is clearly mentioned here as Visha, or agriculture, and the distributing agricultural products, which involves transport, banking, etc. Industry is an artificial means of livelihood, and large-scale industry especially is the source of all the problems of society. Bhagavad Gita, also the duties of the Vaishyas who are engaged in Visha are stated as cow protection, agriculture, and business. We have already discussed that the human being can safely depend on the cow and agricultural land for his livelihood. The exchange of products and transportation is a branch of this type of living. The Vaishyas are divided into many subsections. Some of them are Kshetri owners, some are called Krishant tillers, some of them are called Tilavanik, grain raisers, some are called Gandhavanik, or merchants in spices, and some are called Suvarnik, or merchants in gold and banking. The Brahmanas are the teachers and spiritual masters, the Kshatriyas protect citizens from the hands of thieves and miscreants, and the Vaishyas are production and distribution. The Shudras, the unintelligent men who cannot act independently of the above-mentioned activities, are meant for serving the three classes for their livelihood. Brahmanas were given all the necessities of life by the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas because they had no time to spend making a living. Kshatriyas would collect taxes from the Vaishyas and Shudras, but the Brahmanas were exempt from income tax or land revenue. That system of society no political, social, and economic upheavals. The different castes, Varna classifications, are peaceful human society. Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of God for the sake of perfecting the religious function. Seated on the legs are the Shudras, who satisfy the Lord by service. Purport. The real constitutional occupation of all living entities. Living and perfection by this service attitude. Attain to any division of spirit go on speculating only into matter, but they have no information of the activities of the soul after being liberated by knowledge. Said that persons who only speculate to know things as they are and who do not engage in loving service are simply wasting their time. It is clear that the principle of service was generated from the legs of the Lord for the sake of perfecting the process, but the service is different from the material world. In the material world, no one wants to be a servant and wants to become the master, because false mastership is the of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul in the material world wants to lord it over others. Illusion is fixed on the energy of the Lord. He is to become a servant of the material. That is the real position of the conditioned soul. The last snare of the illusory external energy is the conception of becoming one with the Lord, and due to this, the illusioned soul remains in the bondage of material energy, falsely thinking himself a living good as Narayana. It is actually to be a Shudra than to be a Brahmana and not develop the service attitude, because that attitude alone satisfies the Lord. Every living being, if he be a Brahmana by creation, must take to the Lord. Both Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, this attitude is the perfection of humanity. A Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or perfect his occupation of rendering service unto a Brahmana is supposed to know this fact due to his Vedic knowledge, Vedic wisdom. The other sections are supposed to follow the direction of the Brahmana Vaishnava, one Brahmana by qualification and a Vaishnava by action. That will make the entire society perfect in regard to the order of its social construction. A disordered society cannot satisfy either the members of the society or the Lord. Even if one is not a perfect Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra, but takes to the service of the Lord, not caring for the perfection of his social position, he becomes a perfect human being simply by developing the attitude of service to the Supreme Lord. 34. All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the Spiritual Master. Purport. Since they are born from different parts of the body of the Supreme Lord in his gigantic form, all living entities in all parts of the entire universe are supposed to be eternal servitors of the Supreme Body. Every part of our own body, such as the mouth, hands, thighs, and legs, is meant to render service to the whole. That is their constitutional position. In subhuman life, the living entities are not in this constitutional position, but in the human form of life, they are supposed to know this through the system of the Varnas, the social orders. As above mentioned, the Brahmana is the spiritual master of all the orders of society, and thus Brahminical culture, culminating in the transcendental service of the Lord, is the basic principle for purifying the soul. In conditioned life, the soul is under the impression that he can become the Lord of the universe, and the last point of this misconception is to think oneself the Supreme. The foolish conditioned soul does not take into account that the Supreme cannot be conditioned by Maya or illusion. If the Supreme were to become conditioned by illusion, where would be his supremacy? In that case, Maya or illusion would be the Supreme. Therefore, because the living entities are conditioned, they cannot be supreme. The actual position of the conditioned soul is explained in this verse. All the conditioned souls are impure due to contact with the material energy in the three modes of nature. Therefore, it is necessary that they purify themselves under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who not only is a Brahmana by qualification, but must also be a Vaishnava. The only self-purifying process mentioned herein is to worship the Lord under the recognized method, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. That is the natural way of purification, and no other method is recommended as bona fide. The other methods of purification may be helpful to come to this stage of life, but ultimately one has to come to this last point before he attains actual perfection. Bhagavad Gita 7.19 confirms this truth as follows: Bahunam janmanam ante jnanamam prapadyante vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma surlabham. Text 35. O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Purport. The froggish philosophers may go on with their mental speculations on the subject matter of the Virat, the gigantic form exhibited by the Yogamaya internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But factually, no one can measure such a vast exhibition. In Bhagavad Gita 11.16, Arjuna, the recognized devotee of the Lord, says, Aneka bahudara vaktra netram pashyami tvam sarvato nanta rupam nantam namadhyam napunastavadim pashyami vishveshvara vishvarupa. O my Lord, O gigantic Vishvarupa form, O Master of the universe, I see innumerable hands, bodies, mouths and eyes in all directions, and they are all unlimited. I cannot find the end of this manifestation, nor do I see the middle, nor the beginning. It's the end of the verse. Bhagavad Gita was specifically spoken to Arjuna, and the Vishvarupa was exhibited before him at his request. He was awarded the specific eyes to see this Vishvarupa, yet although he was able to see the Lord's innumerable hands and mouths, he was unable to see him completely. Since Arjuna was unable to estimate the length and breadth of the potency of the Lord, who else would be able to do so? One may only indulge in miscalculation like the frog philosopher. The frog philosopher wanted to estimate the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean by his experience of a well 3 cubic feet large, and thus he began to puff himself up to become as big as the Pacific Ocean. But at last he burst and died by this process. This story is applicable to the mental philosophers who, under the illusion of the Lord's external energy, indulge in estimating the length and breadth of the Supreme Lord. The best path is to become a cool-headed, submissive devotee of the Lord. Try to hear about the Lord from a bona fide spiritual master, and thus serve the Lord in transcendental loving service, as suggested in the previous verse. Okay, and one last verse for today, 36. Just 4 left. Are they long purports? Okay, let's see. 36. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now the glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified, and as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent, even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period, but when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods, representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind and speech, whereas the Ekadandi sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself, and thus while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. So by the request, will everyone still wants to hear more? Yeah. We just started. Warm up. Okay. All right. Okay. 37. Friday night special. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. Purport. The impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activity, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality, who has transcendental qualities. The word guna vadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastimes are the subject matter for the discussions of devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities, yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations one becomes perfectly self-realized, and the proper use of the ear and the tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional state of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. Oh, Jay. 38. O my son, the original poet, Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. Purport. Some froggish philosophers who want to know the Supreme Soul means of philosophy and mental. The devotees who are to some extent in knowledge of the Supreme Lord, so the Lord are the froggish philosophers adversely criticize them. These philosophers, like the frog in the well, who tried to estimate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean, like to take trouble over fruitless mental speculation, instead of taking instructions from devotees like the original poet, namely Brahma. Lord Brahma underwent a severe type of meditation for 1,000 celestial years. Yet he said that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. Therefore, what can the froggish philosophers hope to gain from their mental speculations? It is said in the Brahma Samhita that the mental speculator may fly through the sky of speculation with the velocity of the mind or the wind for thousands of millions of years, and still he will find it inconceivable. The devotees, however, do not waste time in such vain searching after knowledge of the Supreme, but they submissively hear the glories of the Lord from bona fide devotees. Thus they transcendently enjoy the process of hearing and chanting. The Lord approves of the devotional activities of the devotees or Mahatmas, and he says, Mahatmanas tumam partha davim prakritim ashritaha bhajantyam anasya manaso nyatva bhutadim avyayam satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridamataha namasyantascha mam bhaktyam nitya yukta upasate. Bhagavad Gita 9:13 and 14. The pure devotees of the Lord take shelter of the para prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord called Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Srimati Radharani or Srimati Rukmini Devi, and thus they become actual Mahatmas or great souls. Mahatma are not fond of indulging in mental speculations, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. This transcendental method of the Mahatmas gives them sufficient knowledge of the Lord. If the Lord can at all be known to some extent, one may go on speculating and waste the valuable time of his human life, but that will not help anyone to enter into the precincts of the Lord. The Mahatmas, however, are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about his glorious activities and his transcendental dealings with his devotees or with the demons. The devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and the life after. 39. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potential power is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. Purport. The froggish philosophers and mundane wranglers in science and mathematical calculation may not believe in the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they are sometimes puzzled by the wonderful jugglery of man and nature. Such jugglers and magicians of the mundane world are actually puzzled by the jugglery of the Lord in his transcendental activities, but they try to adjust their bewilderment by saying that it is all mythology. There is, however, nothing impossible or mythological in the Supreme Omnipotent Person. The most wonderful puzzle for the mundane wranglers is that while they remain calculating the length and breadth of the unlimited potency of the Supreme Person, his faithful devotees are set free from the bondage of material engagement simply by appreciating the wonderful jugglery of the Supreme in the practical field. The devotees of the Lord see the wonderful dexterity in everything with which they come in contact, in all circumstances of eating, sleeping, working, etc. A small banyan fruit contains thousands of small seeds, and each seed holds the potency of another tree, which again holds the potency of many millions of such fruits as causes and effects. So the trees and seeds engage the devotees in meditation about the activities of the Lord, while the mundane wranglers waste time in dry speculation and mental concoction, which are fruitless in both this life and the next. In spite of their pride in speculation, they can never appreciate the simple potential activities of the banyan tree. Such speculators are poor souls destined to remain in matter perpetually. And 40. Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. Purport. The froggish calculator may raise the objection that if the Absolute is unknowable even by the controlling deities of speech, mind, and ego, namely the Vedas, Brahma, Rudra, and all the demigods headed by Brihaspati, then why should the devotees be so interested in this unknown subject? The answer is that the transcendental ecstasy enjoyed by the devotees is delineating the pastimes of the Lord. The pastimes of the Lord is certainly unknown, but his conclusions, because he will see them as neither factual nor enjoyable. The devotees can at least know that the absolute truth is the personality of Godhead Vishnu, as the Vedic hymns confirm. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadat Pashanti Surayaham. Bhagavad Gita 15:15 also confirms this fact. Vedascha Sarar Aham Veda Vidyam. By culture of Vedic knowledge, one must know the Lord Krishna and should not falsely speculate on the word aham or I. The only method for understanding the supreme truth is devotional service, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktyamam abhijananti yam yaschasmi tatvadaha. Only by devotional service can one know that the ultimate truth is the personality of Godhead, and that Brahman and Paramatma are only his partial features. This is confirmed in this verse by the great sage Maitreya. With devotion, he offers his sincere surrender, Namaha, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavate. One has to follow in the footsteps of great sages and devotees like Maitreya and Vidura, Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami, and engage in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, if one would know his ultimate feature, which is above Brahman and Paramatma. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Creation of the Universal Form. And also thus ends today's reading and this week's reading. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. We continue on Wednesday, 6:30, from chapter 7 onwards. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.